'Tis hard to say if greater want of skill appear in writing or in judging ill, but of the two, less dangerous is the offence, to tire our patience than mislead our sense. These are the opening lines of the 17th century British author Alexander Pope's poem, An Essay on Criticism, in which he expresses, in flowery verse, why he believes that literary criticism in his day, to put it bluntly, is terrible. As much as this poem is Pope asserting what he believes constitutes good criticism, and good art in general, the text itself is also a piece of literature. The poem follows a familiar meter, iambic pentameter to be exact, as well as an AABB rhyme scheme. In just the stanza, there are caesuras or line breaks, and a whole host of other formal poetic aspects that I could dissect and analyze all day, and as an English student who has studied this poem in a formal classroom environment, I have. But I first learned about this poem well before I even read it in a university English class, by encountering it in a video essay. In his video called Can You Judge Art Objectively?, Canadian YouTuber Sage Hayden, better known by his platform pseudonym Just Right, concludes his video with this very passage from Pope's poem. Hayden paraphrases the meaning of this passage and the argument of this text as a whole as follows.
For Pope, criticism creates the grounds from which great art springs, and so if we want better art, we need better criticism.
It's interesting to compare both Pope and Haydn's works, because both are essentially using an art form to comment on the value of art and how we should interpret art. The fundamental difference, however, is that Pope uses the traditional academic written form enshrined by university institutions, whereas Haydn uses the video essay form. And in terms of conveying the content, Haydn's fundamental message about the value of media and literary criticism in guiding artistic sense is in fact enhanced by the YouTube video form. As he opines in his video, there's no one right way to read art, and there are certain advantages that come with the video essay form.
But for a young pop culture fiend like myself, there's no question that Haydn's approach, using some of my favorite films to examine literary and media criticism, is far more effective at conveying his underlying ideas than, say, an academic article on the same topics. Like Pope, he works in the popular medium of his day to express his thoughts on the state of art, elevating this critical work to a kind of pleasing art itself. And as a young English student who was intimidated by having to absorb formal academic literary theory, it felt vindicating to first encounter these concepts and terms in video essays that analyzed some of my most beloved pop culture elements. It stoked my fascination for academic literary studies in a way that probably wouldn't have existed otherwise.
Throughout the 4 years of my English degree, I've had more than my fair share of opportunities to make bold, borderline pretentious claims about several acclaimed works of literature, studying the theoretical writings of such famous scholars as Northrop Frye. And perhaps to capstone that experience, now that my undergrad is coming to an end, I want to argue how the video essays that I've consumed and loved for years, the content made by Haydn and others, are the most effective form of modern literary criticism, in part because of the accessibility and relevancy that I've already addressed. And what better way to explore what makes video essays so great than through a video essay?
Like all literary analysis, let's start by examining the content or text of what video essays contain. I'll begin by turning to another one of Haydn's earlier videos, called What Kind of Hero is Batman? Here, he interprets Christian Bale's portrayal of Batman in the Dark Knight film trilogy from traditional literary heroic archetypes, the classical, tragic, and romantic heroes. Haydn references a lot of familiar names and concepts from any literature class, covering a wide span of critical history from Aristotle's Poetics and the concept of hamartia to U of T's very own Northrop Frye and his academic writing on the traits of romantic literary heroes. On the surface, Haydn's video seems to illustrate exactly what I mean. He uses material from pop culture to convey theoretical literary concepts that would otherwise be dry and uninteresting when presented in a traditional academic format or setting. But then again, there are plenty of academic articles written about similar pop culture content that could advance all the same arguments as Haydn does in his video. Even a thoughtful blog post could convey the same content. To simply look at the content of this video essay would ignore a huge part of what makes this type of literary criticism special, the unique medium or form that it inhabits. So let's take a step back to look at the YouTube medium itself. Ever since the platform's inception, YouTube videos have been used to communicate educational content about a wide variety of works of art and literature. In his TED Talk, best-selling author and educator John Green discusses the effectiveness of the YouTube medium as a form of modern online education. He points out the innate features of the platform, namely the ability for anyone to post or view each other's content, which can reach exponentially more people than a regular classroom environment. Green also refers to the comments section, positioned below the screen on every YouTube video, where viewers can continue the conversation around topics introduced in the video and engage in thoughtful discourse with one another. Beyond this fundamentally democratic aspect of YouTube, the platform has continued to add tools that make such content more appealing and amenable to long-form viewing and analysis. YouTube videos that run extra long often have chapters or timestamp demarcations with helpful titles that can make it easy for a viewer to find the information they're looking for, kind of like a textbook. Many videos now allow viewers to clip certain portions of videos based on these timestamps to create easily shareable URLs, which sort of replicates the process of citing pages in another academic source in a written essay. Indeed, there are a lot of ingrained advantages to the YouTube platform when it comes to conveying long-form analytical content.
But as I've learned as a good English student, acknowledging the historical context behind a work is just as important when it comes to literary analysis. And the use of the video format to convey educational content is hardly a new idea. So again, what better way to examine that historical context than through another video essay?
In 2018, amidst the height of the video essay's popularity, the channel Tube Reporter made a video outlining the medium's history, recapitulating the ideas of American film critic and academic writer Philip Lopat. In his article In Search of the Centaur, the essay film, Lopat identifies this titular rare hybridized cinematic genre, laying out 5 qualifying criteria. 1. The presence of words. 2. The representation of a single authorial voice. 3. The visualized process of working through a complex intellectual problem. 4. A distinct stance being conveyed by the author. And 5. An artful and eloquent composition. You can see the aspects of a conventional, formal written essay in Lopat's prescriptions. Tube Reporter's videos embody these 5 traits to varying degrees, translating Lopat's comparatively dry academic paper into the format for which he advocates. But it also raises the question of what constitutes a video essay and what doesn't, and the unique aspects of video essays that adopt a more analytical literary lens. So historically, video essays follow a well-trodden path carved out by earlier mediums when it comes to genres of more cerebral cinematic criticism. Although the channel's Tube Reporter references, such as Every Frame a Painting, concern film-centric essays, the modern media content examined in such videos also reveals the true strength of this critical format for addressing literary subject matter. Returning to John Green, his popular Crash Course channel includes several videos about classic works of literature, which he approaches in both an educational and casual manner, with the inclusion of plenty of pop culture references. For example, he uses a beloved film character, Chewbacca, to examine the tragic hero archetype in his video on Oedipus Rex, kind of like Haydn's Batman video. But there's a spectrum when it comes to YouTube channels that discuss art and literature. Channels like Crash Course exist to educate viewers about important ideas in literature, but mostly through relaying information rather than advancing original analysis. But there are also several channels dedicated to the more informal analysis of art, movie and book review channels, which are inherently more subjective and a little less substantive.
To be clear, I still adore these informal review channels. For young, impressionable viewers like me, who are fond of media analysis from the beginning, these channels could often function as a gateway to higher literary analysis. But the specific subgenre of video essays I want to look at, the ones that use literary theory and principles to advance more academic readings, are particularly effective because they occupy a unique middle ground between advancing original academic arguments about popular works of media, as well as providing entertaining performative spectacle.
Returning to Lopat's written essay, he argues, quote, "Whatever twists and turns occur along its path, and however deep or moral its conclusions are, an essay will have little enduring interest unless it also exhibits a certain sparkle or stylistic flourish." End quote. Through audiovisual effects, comedic interludes like skits and memes, and other affordances of the medium, video essays certainly have the potential to display this stylistic flourish. But so do YouTube channels dedicated towards entertaining but relatively surface-level analysis, like your average film review channel. Lopat clarifies that, quote, an essayist who is vulnerable and sincere, but unable to project any authority, will seem, alas, merely pathetic and fail to keep our attention. So it is a difficult game to pull off, end quote. At the same time, quote, an essayist who produces magisterial and smoothly ordered arguments, but is unable to surprise himself in the process of writing, will end up boring us, end quote. SparkNotes uploads videos summarizing and explaining classical works of literature on their YouTube channel, but as with a dull, iterative classroom lecture, these videos lack the engaging and opinionated aspects of their interpretive criticism counterparts. By contrast, video essays that treat popular subject matter from an analytical literary lens, advancing a complex argument that is explored throughout the duration, have the unique ability to project the authority that Lopat advises, while also appealing to a wider audience that is more familiar with popular culture.
But I've spoken about way too much theory for now. Sorry to say that, Northrop. So to illustrate how this all comes together, how literary video essays can bring academic content to life in an intriguing, informative, but also an entertaining way, let's engage in some good old-fashioned comparative analysis through a helpful case study.
On December 1st, 2020, the Canadian video essayist known as Broe Deschanel released a video called Why Miyazaki is a True Romantic, in which she discusses how the Japanese filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki's oeuvre of animated films, specifically his film Kiki's Delivery Service, embodies the conventions of the artistic and literary sublime popularized under the broader Romantic movement of the late 18th century in Europe. As Broe, or Maya to use her actual name, acknowledges at the start of the video, she draws much of her inspiration and ideas from Brendan C. Walsh's scholarly essay on the same subject, which was published at the beginning of the year on January 20th, 2020. But the advent of footage from the films she references results in a more dynamic and palatable educational experience, as she focuses on how Miyazaki's stories ground this traditionally European artistic movement in a manner more resonant for Japanese culture and history. The two critics are comparable in that they're both independent researchers who treat a popular piece of modern media with a critical literary lens, and they released their respective works in the same year, remember. Both analyses are also free to access by anyone on the internet. But which is the more popular form of criticism? Well, Broe's video has nearly 100,000 total views on her YouTube channel, whereas Walsh's essay was only cited once, according to the website ResearchGate's official tracker. Now, this is just one example, but I think it's indicative of a larger idea. The visual affordances and streamlined nature of Broe's video analysis render it more accessible and engaging for a wider audience, and it's those very elements that probably contributed to her video's greater popularity. In his own article, Walsh concedes that film, the medium in which Miyazaki works as well, is, quote, perhaps the highest form of unbridled creative expression, end quote. Through their convergence of modalities and their ability to allow formal aspects to complement academic and narrative content, and vice versa, video essays are also capable of providing an unbridled form of creative and critical expression, which help to inform more viewers about important literary theory. The footage Broe deploys from Miyazaki's films, like Kiki's Delivery Service, also conveys her central argument through the visual medium. For example, when describing the romantic tropes within the film, she touches upon the inclusion of vast natural landscapes and imagery. And, as the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so the visual dimension of the film, which the video essay adopts, helps to illustrate romantic ideals in a similar way.
Similarly, Broe removes the barrier between her and her audience by breaking the proverbial fourth wall and addressing the viewers. She and her brand of video essayists create a more accessible mode of conveying content, as opposed to reading the distant words of some pretentious author of the past. So taken all together, her video essay exhibits how form and content can come together to create a really informative and educational product.
Now, all these aspects of form and content are all well and good, but the question remains, why have video essays become such a popular modern outlet for critics? And by extension, why are they so resonant for viewers like myself? We can objectively analyze forms of art like video essays all day, but that doesn't change the fact that they, like any art form, have a creator behind them.
Countless great authors of the past perceived the very art of composing literary criticism as an art in itself, from the ancient Roman poet Horace's Ars Poetica to Alexander Pope's poem An Essay on Criticism, which I already mentioned, and even Oscar Wilde's preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray. This all relates to one final aspect that we have to consider when looking at video essays as a form of literary criticism, and that's the personal context that goes behind their creation. Because the art of making a video essay, much like the art of writing formal literary criticism, is very much an individual exploration into a work of art, and speaks to the particular sensibilities and tastes of the critic who is making it. So with that in mind, I want to look at why someone like me, a new age critic who grew up on popular media, who had a particular set of educational skills through an English degree or formal studies, would gravitate towards the video essay format when approaching a form of criticism.
In the video I mentioned earlier by Sage Haydn, Can You Judge Art Objectively?, he reveals his intentions with using the video essay format. The premise of the video, as the title suggests, came as his response to what he perceived as an increasingly shallow and ignorant discourse surrounding media, most prominently seen in the audience reception to the controversial film Star Wars The Last Jedi. Haydn posits that, contrary to what many vitriolic film critics on YouTube state, the film cannot be deemed, quote, objectively bad by any subjective or arbitrary standard. In a previous video, Haydn close-read the film's polarizing ending, arguing why he believed the scene is emotionally resonant and artful. In the video, he underpins his analysis using Stanley Fish and the School of Reader Response Theory to explain why he thinks the audience interpretations of the most recent films in the Star Wars franchise have become so polarizing. Likewise, in his video Can You Judge Art Objectively?, Haydn provides his thematic interpretation of the finale of the first Star Wars film. Like all literary readings, his position is fundamentally subjective and opinionated, but he relies on textual evidence to justify his claims. By formulating his analysis of the Star Wars franchise, one of the most beloved pieces of modern popular media, within the video essay format, Haydn not only demonstrates the value of formal literary analysis in understanding pop culture, but also how the medium is perfectly equipped to synthesize these popular and academic traditions.
If the purpose of studying English is to increase one's knowledge and capacity to appreciate good art, to equip one with theoretical grounding, academic skills, a broader knowledge base, and the language to articulate those interpretations in a formal academic manner, then I think literary video essays are a testament to that very formal learning process.
So with all that in mind, how am I going to effectively convey my central argument about the usefulness of video essays? Well, as I was randomly browsing YouTube one day, I came across a video called How to Understand a Picasso. One of the most popular video essayists creating content on YouTube right now is Evan Pushak, better known by his YouTube pseudonym NerdWriter1. This video uses Picasso's 1939 painting Night Fishing at Antibes to highlight 5 principles for analyzing art in general, or an introduction to close reading any form of art: reaction, content, form, historical context, and the author's personal context. After watching this, everything clicked for me, and the answer to why my question about why video essays are so effective as a critical medium presented itself to me in reverse. I'm a young English graduate who's grown up watching Star Wars. I want to analyze what makes a certain film or scene effective using a critical literary approach, something my newly acquired academic credentials have equipped me to do. I could write out an astute, in-depth essay to express my opinions. After 4 years of school, it's become kind of second nature to me. But there's a precedent for expressing academic views about modern popular media in an audiovisual medium. Because of that, this would spare me from having to insert cumbersome hyperlinks into a giant block of text. Plus, since I'll be referring to examples from film already, this would be the perfect opportunity to use form to complement my argumentative and analytical content. Because writing about movies is like dancing about architecture, to paraphrase Elvis Costello, or Brian Eno, or Thelonious Monk, or whoever said that. Being an ostensibly tech-savvy and digitally connected youth, there seems to be no better outlet to express my cogent views than through YouTube, where I can reach a wide audience over the internet and take advantage of the many helpful affordances of the medium when crafting my analysis. The form would inevitably impact the substance of my arguments. Even while I draw from principles devised to analyze stories from a literary medium, my deliberate choice to examine pop culture would bring literary theory into contact with the audiovisual realm. The possibilities will then be limitless. Using the die-hard Star Wars fan base to illustrate reader response theory, for instance. If I'm doing my job well, my final product will strike a balance between educating viewers about literary theory while also presenting an interesting subjective take on a piece of popular media. Like many celebrated stories, this video essay would weave form and content together to provide a viewing experience that is both entertaining through familiarity with a piece of media under the analytical lens, but also informative with the relaying of a thoughtful artistic interpretation. The unsuspecting viewer will have clicked on the video because he's a Star Wars fan, but doesn't necessarily know about deconstruction or the sublime or reader response theory, will watch and leave having learned something. Ever so slightly, this video has helped to foster a greater artistic sense among modern consumers, and with luck, he will be encouraged to learn more and study these ideas further on his own. To bring things back to Haydn's video from the start, he sums up the ultimate value of nuanced media criticism in our day and age as follows.
The kind of criticism I think you should seek out or produce is one that seeks to understand what is being communicated in a piece of art, a criticism that puts those messages into context, one that demonstrates how art affects us both personally and socially, and that shares a unique perspective that can make something beautiful even more so.
In other words, literary video essays, like this one.